one thing that some people don't know about me is that I actually have experience in HR. So, I got a foundational piece of what it looks like on the inside, and I just wanted to kind of bounce thoughts and questions off of you because you have a lot more experience in that area, but I think we can really provide value to our viewers. So some of the smaller private companies, they had a lot more flexibility because they didn't have as many rules that they had to adhere to. Because when I was working in HR, it was through the county. So, we had lots and lots of rules and compliance and things that we had to do on different levels, whether it's a state level, government level, labor level, there were a lot of different rules that kind of went into that. And sometimes those rules can protect you, but, sometimes those rules also can be barriers to you in entry. But in private, there's barriers to entry as well, because there's a lot of ways to get around these rules because they don't have as many, and employers, supervisors can kind of finagle the system either way. And I think that becomes a barrier sometimes for professionals of color within that. Can you talk a little bit about the fact that some of these employment specialists can get around what we would consider fair hiring practices to getting people?
Well, yeah, sure. Let me say what I think everybody probably knows, right? What's the number one way to get a job? I mean, it's connections. It's who you know, right? And in the worst of times, that's called nepotism, right? You'll just hire all your family members and you'll hire your friends. And sure, in a small business, mom and pop business, local pizzeria, local bakery, local salon, local barbershop, that works just fine. As you start to get into the bigger companies, certainly government agencies, there are rules against nepotism, right? You can't hire your friends, you can't hire your family. There's a lot of rules around it, like you said, particularly like around preferences for veterans or disabled veterans. There's a lot of laws preventing discrimination against people of color or people with different religious backgrounds, sexual orientation, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And in the government, in the public sector, like you were saying, there are more rules, more transparency required, because those organizations have to show what's called a competitive process. So they typically have to do a public posting and a public scrutiny. They have to document their assessments and interviewing process and their selection, because all that information is public record.
Right.
So you technically, sorry, go ahead.
And you get audited, and I remember that, your processes get audited regularly. So, they can look back and say like, okay, when this person files a grievance and then you didn't necessarily go through all your steps in the order that you were supposed to, you can, as a HR supervisor or in management, and it didn't go correct, you can get reprimanded for stuff like that. And in private, like, in some of these other ones, they can basically sometimes advertise for a posting and know that they're going to hire who they're going to hire before, but they need to advertise it, and they still hire the person that they were going to hire before, but they had to at least advertise that posting. So sometimes, people of color are frustrated and get frustrated. I've been through that process, and they're like, man, what happened? Like, why didn't they go that way? And then you ask a question because you want to know, like, okay, well, what happened? Why was I not hired? And then you end up feeling like you're the angry person. A lot of time they don't go through the proper procedures, and they don't have to tell you.
That's true all across the board right now. I mean, as sort of, suing people and suing agencies has become more of a thing over the last 10, 15 years or whatever. A lot of companies are posting jobs even though they have someone identified who they want to take the position, right? And then if you infuse the momentum around equity and the requirements around equity, you know, what you just said, it becomes a bigger point of frustration for candidates of color, because now you've got companies advertising, promoting, and actively recruiting candidates of color. And a lot of times, it just, if you want to be cynical, their main focus is around having candidates of color in the pool, in the applicant pool.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you get selected,
Right.
right? Because selection of candidates of color has a lot of rules around it. You know, if you remember affirmative action, even in the college admissions settings, that got a lot of controversy around it. Reverse racism was a idiotic phrase that was thrown around for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just something to be mindful of. Is trying, and it's difficult to know when you're on the outside of an agency to know what's a bona fide recruitment, and when an agency is actually looking for diversity, different people of color, different backgrounds, age diversity, so on and so forth, gender diversity, and when it's lip service.